broader math program is affecting your ability to recognize facts. Facts that your community had to find and research because you wouldn't. Who on the board has read the entire FMND? I know many of you didn't read the raw and voted yes. Who on the board thinks this document provides actual answers and solid responses? Who on the board thinks we need a new school while our other schools are in need of repairs? If you vote yes on this project, then you will show you have no morals and no ethics. You will show that you don't care about the community. You will show that you want children to get sick and die. That you bring chills to meetings to say, we need the Borello school that don't back up their opinions with facts. That you use kids to lie for you. So when you post on Facebook that you're all about family, we'll all know it's a lie and that you're really about profit and negligence. You'll show that you're in collusion with the DTSD and care only about being a politician. You are ignoring facts. You aren't doing your job and can be sued for this. If you vote yes and you have kids or no kids, please tell them that you enjoy hurting kids. That when presented with facts, you ignore them. And also tell them that you work for the Board of Education, but you refuse to be educated. Once again, challenge me. Respond to me, talk to me. I've emailed you all several times and hardly anyone responds. Remember at the last board meeting?
Thank you.
I was stopping on
Weller?
Hello, members of the Morgan Hill Unified School District Board. My name is Mark Weller, and I'm co-director for Californians for Pesticide Reform. And we're a nonprofit organization that's been around for over 20 years now. And when we heard about this case, it was so important to us that even on a very unusually scheduled 6 o'clock Friday meeting, we thought we better send somebody down. So I am here. One, to express agreement, at least with the speakers that I've heard so far, and a number of the letters that I've seen from concerned members of the public here. But it's, you know, in some ways it's a struggle, and I know it's difficult, but we are dealing with a painful legacy. And that is, we used poisons before in awful amounts, and they haunt us. And when I talk to a number of pesticide specialists, scientists, or those who have worked with pesticide regulations for decades, one of the things they kept saying over and over was persistent. Eldrin is extraordinarily persistent, very persistent, highly persistent, incredibly persistent. And I'm talking about people like Miriam Rodkin-Ellman, who's a senior scientist at the Natural Resources Defense Council, Margaret Reeves, who's a senior scientist at the Pesticide Action Network, Ann Catton, Pesticide Work Safety Project Director of California Rural Legal Assistance. These are people that I've come to trust and be concerned about. And so when we hear the words from the public about caution, I want to use that again. And when we see very old figures, because this has been banned for many decades. In fact, the Eldrin was on the first Dirty Dozen list by the Pesticide Action Network back in 1985. Maybe you've heard about Dirty Dozen that comes out every year about the pesticides we want to avoid, the stuff that might get on food and stuff like that. The Eldrin was one of them, even though it had already been banned for everything except termites back in 1985 in the United States. So I really would stress caution. In fact, a number of the people I talked to said, look, there's no safe amount. And I really hope that you take that into consideration when you're making these decisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Austin Holt?
Thank you. I'd first like to thank Kirsten and Casino, the police chief, and members of the city who spent a ton of hours kind of working with our community and listening to our concerns and answering our questions. My main focus through all of this has been about safety, and really safety of our kids. We've talked extensively about the proposed parking and drop-off scenarios on Mission Avenida. Mission Avenida is a really small street in our neighborhood that's not set up for any kind of traffic. So if you're voting on this and haven't gone and looked at that street, I implore you to do so. It's not set up to even have a few cars turning around there in the morning. All of our neighbors in this area are against any kind of parking on Mission Avenida. There was an initial proposal to have staff parking there that would have been about 54 spaces. That then was countered by the city, who wanted to have all of the parking on Mission Avenida, so 606 students, which please, it's impossible. And now there's a proposal to have kindergarten and I believe pre-K, which would be about 110 vehicles coming through. We have 14 kids that live on the circle, Altamira Circle, that's right nearby. We're constantly out in the street, we're constantly playing, and we're really concerned that excess traffic is gonna result in one of our kids getting hit by a car, or one of our pets getting hit by a car. I'm not trying to be dramatic. We're really, really concerned about this. So I read the negative declaration document today, and it reminded me that I've been really concerned about traffic and about the potential for kids and animals getting hit by cars. And I kind of forgotten a few months ago, I sat in this room and listened to David and Gino passionately talk about the fact that children's really dangerous and that we don't need a school. And so I'm not an expert on toxins at all, so I can't really speak to that. I mean, I hold you guys responsible for that. If we decide to do this, you guys are deciding to do this, I look to you guys for that. And I'm not an expert on whether or not we need a school. So I really look to this group to keep our children safe. So please put yourself in our positions. Pretend that you're Tiago, who lives right across the street from the parking lot and has an infant, has 2 kindergarten-age kids. Or pretend you're me, riding around with my 18-month-old daughter on my bike. We're all gonna be breathing in this air. We're all gonna be living in this neighborhood. So please just make sure whatever decisions you make, that you keep all of us safe. Thank you.
Armando Benavides.
Good afternoon, board members, and Mr. Redondo. So we have a toxin that was banned in 1985 because it was toxic for humans, and here we're in 2017, and we have this toxin that is present now on levels that are unsatisfactory for a school. Now, we already did remediation one time already, and a couple of $1 million were probably spent in that remediation. And we thought that we were gonna get clean land. When Mr. Redondo sat there and negotiated a deal. Clean land, free land. What did the developer get? A free pass. They get points, so they now get better opportunity to get their development proposal approved. That's really what it is. Now we're spending all kinds of staff time, money, all kinds of resources just so that we get this land. The reality is, I sent you an email today that shows you the enrollment patterns over the years for this district. The higher capacity is 9,700. That's a couple of years ago, we were at 9,700 enrollees. In fact, now we're at low 9,000. So how is it that we have a capacity of 9,700 and now Mr. Redondo is now saying that we need another school? The reality of it is that we have capacity. What we have is we just have to manage our resources a little better. Okay? We have a school there, elementary school, in Tom's district, Mr. Arnett's district, that really is underdeveloped, underused, underutilized. We should be able to get that school transferred, transferred to continuation school back to its own site, spend a little bit of money in developing that site so that it's combined continuation school and adult school, and open up that elementary school that's already being cleared from any toxins. You build up that school, that elementary school, and make it a neighborhood school in Mr. Arnett's district, and we increase capacity for 600 new students, and we will save millions of dollars. All we have to do is be smart about our resources. We don't have to take this free land that's contaminated, that will be contaminated. There's no guarantee whatsoever. And what I'm talking about is, I'm not talking just about our students, I'm talking about our teachers, our district administrators, and our parents that are going to be all around that site. So I hope that you would consider that our enrollment patterns have been 9,700 a couple of years ago. we're in the low 9,000, we have capacity for 700 students, and what we need to have is a bright, young leader, or a leader that would basically shuffle our resources so that we don't have to make decisions about a toxic site, and we can have a good school for Mr. Arnett's district.
Thank you. Sabrina?
Good evening, district and board members. For over a year now, I've been in front of you at various times asking for a better approach at this proposed school site. I started my research by taking a very unbiased approach and hoping to see a very well thought out plan that would address all potential hazards in a responsible way. I have read all of the public documents, attended meetings, and provided my own comments to the draft raw. Time and time again, I tried to see how this plan would address all the hazards this site presents, and time again, I have been disappointed and left with more questions than answers. In the very little time I had to actually read through the responses to the comments, I still felt that there were many holes in the plan and areas that were addressed with very standard canned responses, such as, this is not a requirement of CEQA, or this is the minimum required analysis, or this will fall within the acceptable risk level. The recurring theme to me was that this plan will cover the minimum required analysis and mitigation in order to get past the red tape as quickly as possible. And this sentiment was reinforced by many of the 20+ respondents in the community, along with the state and local agencies. In my opinion, there is sufficient time to conduct an additional analysis. More schools are not immediately needed. Quoting the master plan, the district would need three new elementary schools by 2035, as per the June 2017 presentation. I think it is prudent to conduct additional environmental review using different consultants to produce a draft environmental impact report that would include the evaluation of project alternatives and allow for greater time to review the impacts and coordinate with the required agencies like the water district, city, community, etc. The draft raw and the MND are incomplete, filled with inaccuracies, and in the end not sufficiently protective of the health and safety of the community. Just because you aren't required to do something doesn't mean you shouldn't. You, the board, owe it to the kids in the community you represent to demand the district to do better here, or better yet, ask the bigger question of, can't we find a site with less hazards, risks, and mitigation requirements and costs? Believe me, I would love to be able to walk my kids to school, but not at this cost and with this many inherent risks, and a plan that is less than 100% thorough to address such risks. Examples of some of the comments from state and local agencies include the California Department of Transportation quoting a lack of analysis. Santa Clara Valley Water District cited numerous concerns and went so far as to state that all assumptions for the evaluation of Cross Valley Pipeline are incorrect. Concerns about grading from the water district were addressed with stating that since there is no current grading plan, they can't determine what the actual elevation will be with respect to the pipeline. Just because there is no current grading plan doesn't mean this shouldn't be addressed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Brown, and I'm a parent of 2 children attending school in Morgan Hill Unified, a homeowner in the Alicante subdivision, and the son of a 28-year school board member from Cotati Road Park Unified School District. So needless to say, I have been well schooled to school board issues for a district much the same as Morgan Hill Unified addresses. I will address the Mission Avenue to access issue in just a second, but first I wanted to pass along some first-hand comments from neighbors and others who live in the area regarding the proposed Borello Elementary. What I'm concerned about is the misdirected goal of building a school which will have lower attendance and likely require redistricting to pull kids from different areas. See, you're proposing to build a new elementary school in one of the most affluent areas in Morgan Hill. The new Borello Ranch homes will be starting at over $2 million and likely go significantly higher. These families will not be sending their kids to public school. A good percentage of the current residents from Mission, Coyote, and Alicante already do actually send their kids to various private schools in the area. As a product of public schools, I'd love to change the perception of public schools in Silicon Valley, where parents falsely scramble to give their children the best schooling advantage in a highly competitive environment. But a fancy new school is not going to do it. The school will have low attendance, and the school board and district employees will be left explaining why so much money was spent on a fancy new school when funds could have been reallocated to remodel schools, reinforce learning programs, and most importantly, reward our teachers. Yes, I do understand certain funds come from the state and they're for new constructions and so on, but I also understand that an existing portion of the budget can be reallocated to existing schools. So with respect to the school access on Mission Avenue, the city's comparison of overflow street traffic from Nordstrom on Dunn to Borello on Pete is quite simply a very poor comparison. Even when all the orchards are ripped out along Pete someday and the homes are built, it will not see the traffic along Pete even remotely close to Dunn's traffic. Look, many of you likely live in a residential area. The street Mission Avenue is where I taught my boys to ride their bikes. It's our home neighborhood and has an incredibly warm and safe feeling. Building a parking lot on our street tears this away from us. You do not need to put any vehicle access on Mission Avenue. I'm more than happy to suggest alternate layouts. It's not that hard to figure it out. Such disregard for our opinion will just upset the neighborhood by causing dangerous and unsafe congestion. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Borgioli?
Good evening, trustees. Chris Pioni, City of Morgan Hill Community Services Director. Been working with the team at the school district on this site for some time, and just want to reiterate what was put in the letter from our city manager to the board earlier today, and express support for the city suggested alternative. We think we really appreciate the effort that the team at the district has gone through to put this alternative together with us at the city, and we think it provides the most flexibility moving forward in the planning for the school site, and really will help us have better options for circulation at the site going forward. So thank you.
Allow me to close the public comments. I didn't miss anyone, did I? Okay. Moving along, trustees, before us is a discussion on whether the adoption of resolution to approve the findings and adopt the mitigated negative declaration for the M and D, and the mitigation monitoring program and approval of the elementary, Borello Elementary School project. So I'd like to open it for discussion, trustees. I'm sure we've all read through the latest set of documents, and we've seen in print many of the comments from the past, and fellow trustees' comments repeated again in the document. But I open it to discussion. Mary?
Thank you, President Leibovich. I had a question about the pipeline safety aspect. I don't know if there's someone here that can answer that, but it appeared that it was mentioned that the pipeline safety aspect of the MND had been revised, but then when I read through it, I didn't see any revisions. So it all looked like October 2012. I mean, and the revisions were highlighted, or did I miss that?
It actually was a new appendice that was included in, I can find the new appendice. It's appendix E in the document. So we updated the pipeline safety report based on the new information we received from the water department with a pressurized water line. They reran the analysis, and PlateWorks determined that the impact was not significant based on the new information. So there's a new report that's included as the appendix that has all that information.
Thank you.
I'd like to have a little bit more explanation on the concerns of the city concerning the city.
Most of it has to do with traffic. I don't know if you want to talk about it. I'm sure Mr. Gino could step up to the front again, but there's been several meetings with many people involved with those concerns. So
I can talk about it, yeah. And maybe Chris can fill in if I miss something. We met with the city about their initial concerns, which was having traffic any parking lot off of Pete Road. So an arterial road is meant to move traffic quickly across and usually to like freeways or onto major arteries. And so there was concern about having any type of drop-off area or parking lot off of Pete Road because that could slow down traffic on an arterial roadway. I think we heard that loud and clear that their preference was not to have anything off of Mission Avenida, but if you look at the actual site itself, it's very rectangular. So when we looked at the amount of queuing space that would be needed, it just wasn't feasible that you could have traffic off and have all the drop-off off of Mission Avenida. We had also at that point had already had, I think, 2 meetings with neighborhoods. And so we knew that the neighborhood concern was to have actually no access at all off of Mission Avenida. So we had these two conflicting sides, one that wanted no access on P Road and one that wanted no access on Mission Avenida. I think the main concerns related from the city of Morgan Hills aspect is really enforcement of traffic and not wanting to create another kind of Nordstrom situation. And so there was significant concerns from the police department. So we met again and worked out what we call the city alternative, which is really a brainstorm of both. So the city didn't actually propose the plan. It was really as we sat down and brainstormed what would be the best option. Everyone in the room agreed that this met both needs. Not that I think either side are really happy. We've heard from the neighbors and their concerns. I think the city's preference would still be to have all traffic on Mission Avenue for drop-off and pickup and parking. But we all understand kind of what our constraints are. And so we looked at then the effect of the proposal, which would really be to move kinder drop-off only. Kinder drop-off is different than regular drop-off for older kids traditionally, because kinder parents are going to stop, they're going to park, and typically they walk their child in. So it's a little bit different of a drop-off than we see for older children. So moving just the kinder drop-off to Mission Avenida, we thought would help respond to the city's concerns, but it would also help to minimize the number of cars and the amount of traffic that we heard from the neighbors. And so then we analyzed the new proposal, and we found that it would not require any new mitigation measures. And so staff's recommendation is that we do adopt the city alternative, which is included this evening.
I just want to add that the long-term plan for Pete Road is to have 2 lanes going north and 2 lanes going south. So that was one of the concerns on the throughway for the traffic in that area. And so in the city's interest in the long-term plan for that to be a corridor from north to south, which there was slight adjustments in the configuration of drop-off and the queuing that dealt with that issue as well.
Thank you. I'd also like to comment, and I appreciate the comments from the high school student about the number of students in your classes. But let me point something out. The state of California is 44th out of 50 states in per pupil expenditure. We all know that has to change. That's the only way we're going to get the number of students done. It's a disgrace. There's no question. But the other thing I want to point out, that we do want to lower the class size, and especially we want to lower the class size in elementary schools. But to do that, we have to have additional classrooms. There's no way that that can happen, because that's going to allow, if you go from 24 to 21 or 28 to 24 or whatever, that means that those additional students will take up 4 or 5 of them, take up another classroom and another classroom. And when you multiply that by 8 elementary schools, that's additional classrooms all the way down the line. Where are those classrooms going to come from? So I really have trouble with, right now, as of this time, and having spent 20-some years in the school district, I would love to see us have some extra classrooms. I think it would be fantastic, because it would give breathing room in our schools. We hear the teachers always complain, we don't even have a place to meet. We don't even have a resource room, because of the fact that the space just does not exist. So maybe it would be nice to have a school where we had maybe 4 or 5 extra classrooms that aren't being used, or that we would have that overflow from lowering class sizes. The other thing is, I wouldn't even think of going to dismantle the adult school and move them to another place after they've moved, I don't know how many times in the last 10 years. And then when you go to see what's happening in our ESL programs, in our adult high school diploma program, in our concurrent programs, no. I don't see putting an elementary school on that site. I think that's the last thing that we want to do. I'm gonna let somebody else comment. I have some other statements, but I'll let somebody else comment.
Any more comment right now?
I have some questions.
Certainly.
So, on page 50, there was a comment relative to the air monitoring, the accuracy and the air chamber, the amount of units per square footage. That has been illuminated several times in the past. And the response to that comment was the air monitoring equipment will be calibrated and maintained per the manufacturer's recommendations. So that really didn't answer my question about how many of these are on per square feet and how many are needed. It also says the air monitoring described in the RAW is consistent with DTS's regulations, policies, guidance, documents for remediating the sites that have been successfully implemented on thousands of sites. I bet those thousands of sites didn't have 2,000, at the rate of 2,000% more of the highly toxic Borello on the site, and if so, I would like to know. I requested, because I keep hearing this throughout the CEQA and the MND, DTS's regulations, policies, and guidance document and standards. They talk about standards. I've never seen a specific standard within any of the RAW, the CEQA, the MND, but they talk about it. So this policy and guidance and regulations and current standard document, it says. So I requested some information, and here's the answer I got. It said the RAW reflects the professional recommendations of our consultant, clearly consultants who have been in business for over 30 years and worked on more than 3,000 residential, commercial, and public works projects throughout the Bay Area, including more than 50 school districts in San Francisco. As professionals, Cleary is using education knowledge, past experience, regulations, etc. to inform their standards of practice. There are many DTS regulations, and I was given a site, and none of those had the current standard document that's talked about in throughout the MND and the CEQA. I'm very leery of Cleary Consultant because on June 27th, the consultant couldn't even answer the accuracy of the unit, the air chamber size, how to calibrate the unit, and I specifically asked that with DTS on the line, and they couldn't answer it. So we're relying on a consultant that has 30 years in the industry that couldn't answer a question about a key air monitoring device. I find that to be pretty stunning. And on page 65, it still goes into the dust monitoring information during the earth moving, and it also talks about the 24-hour turnaround. And it talks about calibrating the units daily in there. And it talks about per the manufacturer. So the response is all air monitoring equipment will be calibrated and maintained per the manufacturer's recommendations. So nobody can answer what the manufacturer's recommendations are. So the fact is that these units need manual calibration every time the temperature changes a significant amount. That is not called out in any of the raw. That is not called out in any of the CEQA. That is not called out in any of the MND. And this is the answer that was given. Again, the equipment will be calibrated per the manufacturer's recommendations, but none of that is indicated in any of this document. So how do we know that this is going to be calibrated per the manufacturer when it's not even illuminated in any of the documents? On page 100, this is probably one of the most significant items. It's in the MM6. The project will consist of excavation of contaminated soil, it goes on to say. It goes on to say exposure factors include incidental ingestion, dermal contact, and inhalation. The mitigation should be adherence to all requirements set forth in the DTSC approved RAW. I don't see any of these adherence requirements in any of the documents. I also, it says the meter readings will be assessed using differences between the average upwind and downwind. The results of it compared to CARB, ambient air standard, for the PM10. So it's also saying in here, California Air Resources Board and the United States EPA have adopted ambient air standards. So the experts are CARB. CARB and EPA are the experts. And it says, in accordance with CARB and EPA, construction of the proposed RA would not result in the emissions of criteria of air pollutants. So we can't answer the question of, do we have the sufficient amount of air monitors on the work site? Again, we're at the 11th hour now, and we still haven't got a sufficient answer. We haven't got a sufficient answer on, which is key. You have to calibrate these things accordingly, and none of this calibration is mentioned in any of the documents. Calibration is crucial to the plus and minus 5% accuracy that the manufacturer states. Nowhere is it illuminated in any of the documents. So you're not going to achieve the basic quality control that is really needed for this site. What's even more interesting, and I actually read this in front of the independent review panel for DTSC on August 9th. We're using the PMT methodology for this. So PMT 10, and if you have a PMT 2.5, there's a different methodology to use. But we're doing PM10. So the SOP MIL-SPEC 16 is identified for PM10. This is outlined in CARB, the experts in the industry. And it specifically outlines quality control and the accuracy of the measurements. So there's no measurements in the ROAR or the CEQA of monitor detection drift methodology as outlined in CARB. Again, the SOP MIL-SPEC 16. No mention in the ROAR or CEQA of replicate sampling, which serves to measure the precision of the analysis. No mention of, in the ROAR or the CEQA of the duplicate sampling, which is a process of 10% of the samplings are analyzed to indicate reproducibility of the analysis, and more important, to monitor conditions like instrument drift. Again, we're talking about the accuracy of these units on this property. They're only identifying 1 in the upwind, 2 in the downwind, and we're not even adhering to quality control standard operating procedure that CARB outlines. There's no mention in the RAW of changing of the filters on the PDR unit specifically wearing gloves without powder, so you don't contaminate the filter. There's no mention of that in any of the documentation. There's no mention in the raw secret of the sample invalidation criteria relative to insects on or within the filter. That happens. And there's no mention of how to remove these insects with a Teflon forceps. And then make an analysis to either validate or invalidate. There's many more in this SOP, but we're talking about protecting our community during this remediation, and we can't effectively do this in a quality-like manner. And I'm very, very concerned about it.
Gino, can I follow up with a question?
Sure.
If we could have staff clarify, I'm also very interested in terms of the monitoring. It's been a huge concern in the community. If there are promises made in the RAW about calibration, detection, that standards are going to be adhered to, how do our folks on the job site know that's happening? How can we assure that all of the standards are being met and all of that calibration is being done as we're laying it out? Who has that expertise to be able to hold the job site workers accountable to all these specs?
So, our quality control management, who's been a part of the discussions of the RAW and been involved in those conversations with the Department of Toxic Substance Control. Both of those agencies are on site as oversight. In addition, the district hires a third-party hygienist company, somebody like Cleary, it could be Cleary, to be on there at all times when activities are happening. That person is responsible for maintaining the logbook. The logbook includes things like measuring the wind, recording it, taking pictures of the activities that are happening. I'm sure if they were here, they could tell us exactly what's in that logbook. But the whole purpose is that the logbook serves as a record of the project. And so that is turned in along with BTSC's visits when they're there as part of the final documentation.
So the overseers have enough knowledge and expertise to be able to understand the standards that are being referred to me in the RAW and on a moment-by-moment basis, be able to say, that doesn't look right to me, or we need to stop, that needs to be recalibrated, or...
This is their profession. These are equipment that they are used to working with. This is not something that is new to them. They're used to calibrating equipment. They use this particular equipment in other projects, so it's not new equipment or new processes that they're used to these.
So,
Thank you.
so you're welcome. And so, again, if part of that is true, why didn't the consultant answer those questions back in June? They said they had the 30 years of expertise, and they couldn't answer some of those simple questions. Why aren't these procedures outlined in any of the documents? I mean, are we supposed to just imagine that all this is happening? Are we going to take your word for it that Bay Area Quality Management Group is going to take this on? It doesn't say that in any of the documents, what you just said.
It states very clearly, actually, in MM6 that it's permitted through Bay Area Air Quality Control.
Right, but it doesn't state that they're going to interject themselves with the consultant and do all these things. So there's a lot of unknowns here. There's a lot of questions, and again, we're talking about protecting the community during this. And I challenge anybody in here to tell me that those units identified, the 2 or 3 units, are sufficient enough. That unit is not even on the CARB website as a operable unit, and CARB is the professional in this area. And so I don't take anybody's word anymore, not when it concerns the safety of the public.
Well, Gino, I hope we all do care about the community, and we're here because this is the plan to protect the community. So I would like to see them to talk a little bit, because after the June 27th board meeting, we did have our consultant contact Thermo regarding your comments, because we weren't able to get the representative's name. So we did contact them directly and to validate what you had stated. Maybe you want to debrief what this gave us?
And maybe to be clear, you know, the folks we have one person from a whole staff. They have a huge staff over at Clear Consultants, each with their specific training in each specific methodology. So to be completely fair, like for example, I won't know every single detail about everything they all do, but I know a cursory overview. So like just to be clear on that one, again, Chris, one of the senior partners of the firm. But we did follow up with the questions with your specific questions regarding the unit itself, to which we had two comments. One from, to echo what Kirsten said, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District reviewed the HASP, which is the Health and Safety Plan, which talks about the efficacy of the units. And they agree that not only is it good enough for the counts, which is one upwind, one downwind, and, sorry, pull my notes from the sighting, one downwind, one upwind, along with a predominant wind direction, all to which will be coordinated with a meteorological station on site, not only effective for de-aldrin and pesticides, but for naturally occurring asbestos, which is even more toxic than de-aldrin. So they have confirmation from that from both the toxicologists, and they had sent me some supplemental data to that. But by DPSC's oversight, because they are the ones who actually approved the ROM, because they're the experts in the field, they were satisfied with that oversight of the DAQ, so just to pass that forward. And then also to the two other comments that you mentioned, environmental guidance, and I had to look into that a little bit, how you were raising the question, because I had to look at myself. So there's 3 or 4, I actually imagine a litany of different reference manuals that all cross-reference each other as to the criteria and the thresholds. One of which was I think the one you were referencing was the environmental guidance document. So there's one guidance document for all of DPSC on their website, which talks about how they go about approving a project, so their methodology and how they actually create either a raw, RAP, and then and reference that method and how that is accountable. And then there's other reference guides which report up to that, which are, for example, the preliminary environmental assessment document. That is the guidance document, the guiding document for our ROC. So that was what was performed through the targeted site investigation, where they created a preliminary environmental document assessment. That is the guidance document for the ROC, if I'm following the wording correctly about that. And then 2 other things. One, you were mentioning and just to be, the way I'm understanding your question is that the question regarding the efficiency of the dust control, so that unit measures dust and particulates in the air. And I think Chris Chickanowski with Clear Consultant mentioned they're not a target, they're an upper limit threshold, so they never want to get even close to that. So there's a few different ways they manage, not just the units, which have very specific data towards the particulates, but also visual management of the site and other resources which are outlined in the law, which I don't need no more than that. And then you also have the daily sampling, which is happening for the actual, what we do pull away from the site to tell not only how much we're collecting, if we're collecting any at all, which is the threshold, not even, regardless of if there's anything in the dust, it's just dust in general. Any dust in general, whether it be toxic or otherwise, is being metered on the site. And then also we're doing concurrent sampling to meter and just get data as we're ongoing throughout the project. So there's issue of dust, particulates, issue of the toxicity or presence of toxins within the dust, and then.
Thank you, Christina.
So, you're also indicating, thank you so much, I appreciate that, the fact that de-aldrin came back and there's no concrete answer until a document was discovered on the CARB site that's called Pesticides in the Air, which explains very precisely the wicking effect. And nobody can really explain why de-aldrin came back at a 2,000% rate between 2005 and 2014. And except this document explains the reason, the unknown that we've all been asking for. So if we're going to remediate
Let
down...
me correct that. That document is not specific to the site.
That's right, of course not.
Point of order, please let him proceed.
It's not specific to any site. It's explaining a very scientific, maybe you should read it, a very scientific explanation by experts in the industry how pesticides deep down in the soil wick their way up through the capillaries to the surface. Okay. This is why the Eldrin came back. There's no other explanation. The Eldrin is not used on crops. It will actually kill the crops. The Eldrin, contrary to what DTSC says, wasn't used to refarm, because if you certify the property free and clear, why would the owner recontaminate the property after 2005, knowing either there's residential or a school going to be built? Doesn't make any sense. Plus, the Eldrin will kill the crops. The Eldrin is a termite defender. So here's the reason why I'm so concerned about all these things that I brought up. You may think I'm just bringing up things. We have a duty of obligation as a board member to ensure that everything that's in these documents are true and correct. I've identified what I consider major holes in the documents. And I hear some answers, just like answers, the Santa Clara Valley Water District asked for a 14-day extension, and the answer that was given to that was absolutely unacceptable in my mind. So I look at this as my duty and obligation to do my due diligence, because if, God forbid, down the road that we're sued, I want to ensure that I myself is protected, because if whoever brings suit, if and when it happens, if you continue with the present road, because the Eldrin is going to come back, if you do offload, the only solution here, the only solution is bioremediation to get rid of the Eldrin, because that wicking effect is going to happen. So if I get sued personally, the district is not going to protect me legally, because if they prove negligence in some way, or prove that any of us didn't do our due diligence, okay, and if that's proven in court, our legal system in the district doesn't protect each of us. So I want to ensure, and I want to make it known, I'm doing everything I can to ensure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And from what I could see in this document, this MND document throughout, it was stunning that the answers to every single agency was, well, you're really not correct, like the Santa Clara Valley Water District. And you don't need to know that, so we're going to waive the 14. We're not even going to extend you 14 days. So I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned about proceeding. I think we do need to take a step back and ensure the public that each of these things that were brought out are covered in a document that we can see, and be satisfied that all these things are going to take care of. I do have many other questions, but I'm going to defer so I can let some of the other trustees talk.
And maybe if I could just comment, because there's a few things you said there. One was, so just to, I don't know who was all in the room, but the previous method that was used, the voluntary cleanup action, I believe is what it was called, used bioremediation back in 2005 when it was certified clean. So the suggested method for this is the off-fall, which is what all the schools do in California. And so it's a different methodology. And the fact that they came back sort of was, I mean, for my mind, speculation. I mean, it's really hard to figure that. All I know is the Eldrin's bad, and it's there. And what is the most surefire way to try to do that?
What was the bioremediation back in 2005? What specific bioremediation? What did they use?
Oh,
Precisely. They use a much different bioremediation process than they used in 2005.
Well, let's ask you then, what were the two different processes? The one recommended and the one in 2005?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
You said it's two different methods.
The bioremediation.
What were the two different methods?
The bioremediation today is drastically different than what was used in 2005.
Oh, how?
They used different types. Back in 2005, I would have to, I forgot the name, it's called Factor something, and they don't use that today. So, technology has come about much more in almost 10 years, you know.
So they did believe.
I'm sorry?
They did believe that the bioremediation and cleared the soil at the time through bioremediation. And at this point, bioremediation could occur, but it is my recommendation that we actually remove the soil with the deodorant in it. And that way, the bioremediation doesn't have a chance to fail.
But it's not pesticide free. So in other words, you're removing it down to the threshold, and that wicking effect in 2, 3, 4, 5 years is going to wick back up again, okay? Because there's no answer as to why it wicked up prior, except through the process identified in that document that I called out. So you're right. Let's take out the soil. The problem is you're leaving deelgin in there. And that deelgin, even if you put new soil back in, is going to wick up to the surface again.
Well, to be fair, the assumption of, we can all surmise and speculate as to how the deodorant got back, even to be fair, even if we don't agree with the DPSC. DPSC at the public hearing that they had said they assumed that maybe some from the other homes, when they cut grade, they brought dirt from another area. I mean, I wasn't there, and I don't think any of us would just be kind of there. And then I think the custom, you know, the thing about bioremediation, it's custom every time you do it, so it can change with the year. You know, they have to actually physically engineer whatever product they have for that moment. So we'll never, we'll never know the efficacy improvement as the product is being developed. So.
And in all fairness, when they did do the bioremediation, the confirmation samples, 5 of them still had deodorant in them, ranging from 1.2 to 1.8 kgs. So it wasn't pesticide free even after the bioremediation.
President, would you like to?
Yeah, I was going to say, thank you, Gino. You had thoughtful questions, and we appreciate, the research you have done. We do appreciate it. Dr. Gerard, I'm going to excuse our civics students. You're welcome to stay, but customarily, your teachers give you credit after an hour at the meeting.
Can we just applaud these students
Yeah.
for being here
I
on the
know.
second day of school?
They're on it. Live up, right? Live up.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, neighbor.
Okay, sorry, we'll let you.
I have a lot of things to say, but at this point, I'd just like to make a very simple comment. I spoke to Milan Sonko, who, as you know, is the project manager, and I said, Milan, why is it that we have selected the off-ball method when we see the incredible concern that there is from the community in terms of the air quality that I think Trustee Borgioli has done an outstanding job of drilling down and really exposing the fact that the people that we've talked to so far have absolutely no idea how this is going to go. Absolutely no idea. And we know from the SDAR study about how can you get, as a human being, how can you get exposed to deodorants basically through the air. It can come into your eye and your skin, you can breathe it in. It could maybe fall on some food in your garden. And so I think the work that I would really want to applaud Citizen Trustee Borgioli for the outstanding work that you've done. We have absolutely no coherent explanation from the regulator as to why this happened. That in and of itself should give us pause. This is very, very serious. And so I talked to Milan Sonko. I said, why is it that we're using off-ball? Why aren't we using bioremediation? Is that not the proven technology? She said, absolutely. We're all for bioremediation. And I said, well, why is it? And she said, it's because the district gave us a project schedule that was very aggressive. A project schedule that was very aggressive. That's why. And I also asked her, I said, has bioremediation changed? at all between 2005 and today? So, absolutely. It's a whole different science. It's kind of like using whatever the predecessor to the flip phone was, and trying to use that today as a cell phone. You know, technology is rapidly advancing. So I just want to make that one comment. I have many other things to say, but I'll just pause here because I totally agree with what Trustee Borgioli has said. And there's been absolutely no, it's interesting in the document here, in this rebuttal to citizen comments in the dedicated negative declaration, that they don't even address this. They don't address it because they don't have an answer. And that's consistent throughout this document. They walk away again and again and again by giving vague responses, by referring to old data, such as the old EPA standard of the 0.034 mg/kg as a screening level for Galvin. Well, Dr. Hank Tennikus, I've tried to encourage some of you to read his research. He's one of the top toxicologists in Europe. He is the one who's talking about how the overuse of pesticides in agriculture are leading to the disappearance of birds and bees, and finally us. And for us, from a moral standpoint, to disturb this land by using off-haul method, are we crazy? When we have other means that the DTSC, that some people like to say is the great expertise in this area, they say it's an absolutely proven technology, and the only reason that we're doing this is because the district has told them that they have an aggressive construction schedule.
Actually, that's not true. I'm making the recommendation, and we had the choice to make it on off-haul or bioremediation, and it's my recommendation. It's off-haul.
Well, your recommendation is absolutely the wrong recommendation, and you're endangering the community. There's no one in the community that wants this. These people on a Friday night, why are we meeting on a Friday night?
I think we're getting off the topic.
No,
now.
excuse
We're
me,
meeting
I
on
have
Friday
the
night.
floor.
But
I have the floor,
Gerard,
sir.
Dr.
You can
Gerard.
have it for me, because I have a question to ask you, so we
Yeah,
can get done.
Dr. Gerard, I know you do have the floor. I want us to not personalize and be disrespectful to one another.
Not disrespectful.
Everyone has their own opinion. Please do not, let's not personalize.
It's not
Please
personalized.
Please
It's
continue.
not personalized.
Well,
We're here, yeah, we're on a Friday night.
yes, we are.
Why?
We all are.
Why?
So let's just continue
I asked that question. Why
on
are we
the
here?
topic.
Why? Is it?
Sorry, did you?
I'm done for now, go ahead.
Okay, Ron?
Yeah, the first thing I would not is make any comments on the superintendent's recommendations, no matter what they are. This is not time for that. The second thing I want to ask, is that person here that talked to you about this?
What person?
The person that you referred to that said we were on a fast track, the head person for the.
You know who Milan Sonko is?
Yes, is he here?
She.
Is she here?
No.
Is that individual here?
Is she here? Is Milan here? No.
Okay, I just wanted to see, I wanted to talk to myself if she was here. And that's it. But I wish we would stay on the topic and not refer to people at this, I wish we would stay on what this is all about and what the amendment may be, not personalize this with somebody who's sitting at the dais up here.
I have a question on a little bit different aspect of the very diverse amount of studies that have gone into this report. And I, again, yesterday, spent some time, drove over, looked at the site again, drove through the neighborhood, you know, trying to imagine what it's going to be like with a school there. I went down and talked to some persons at the city who have had input on the recommendation for the traffic and so on and so forth. And there's no easy answers. If we had lost 9 acres, I think we'd have a lot more options, but we lost them to a city action. One thing I'd like to understand a little bit better for the safety of our children, because that is our number one concern. There's no disagreement on that. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the traffic and the control of traffic in the neighborhood. Are we looking at stop signs stop lights. I was very interested and appreciate the detailed diagrams of the traffic flow and the different, varieties of ways that was considered. So can we get a little bit more information on coming in and off of Cochrane, what happens, as you're coming down Pete Road, where might there be, ways to slow traffic?
You could talk about the potential roundabout issue.
And I'm curious, I've been through Barrett, El Toro, Live Oak, Sobrado, and I want to hear about where the stop signs and the stop lights and who's paying for them. Because that's always part of all of this.
So in working with Chris Gino at the city and the lead engineers to site the school, the commitment from the city was that in working with this plan is that in the traffic study, we contemplated both the current traffic volume levels of service and then the future volume levels of service when and if Pete ever does go to 4 lanes. In talking with the city, they didn't really have a time frame when that would be, but it wasn't any time in the near future. A lot 20 years and throughout, how soon are we thinking that it might be what's that?
He said not in our lifetime.
He said not in our lifetime, right, so, yeah, hopefully a whole lot longer than 20 years for me.
For me too.
Yeah, they have talked about a few different mitigation measures. One, so the plan for Pete Road is a minor arterial road is to connect eventually through to the adjoining road, I forget what the name of it is, all the way through Hale, all the way to Hale. When that happened, the city would have to signalize the corner of Cochrane and Pete, most likely in the future. For around this school site, there were 2 or 3 mitigation measures I think were recommended in the future development. I think 1 or 2 of which at different locations were roundabouts to sort of create a physical barrier that would slow traffic and maybe wide roundabouts to allow for bus traffic and things, accessing off of Pete Road. And part of what the city wanted, why they wanted to float traffic onto Mission Avenida is because it is a slower road. But again, like the community said, it is a community, so there's this balance of how do we compromise and find those things. But that's how they talked about mitigating speed at this time. And then if they ever did have to mitigate, the city would have to do their own sort of MND or whatever process they would be going through environmentally to make sure that they have the city slow the speed on their own, because that's their public right of way.
And so they pay for that through safe schools, or, that isn't part of our, after just going through the facility master plan and et cetera, there's different pots of money, but that's more on the city's ledger than on ours, as more traffic mitigation is necessary.
Beyond.
The curbs are already put in for what we need now. We would be paying to cut through and connect. But when it comes to building and widening the road, that is further down the line. There are
I'm talking about in the neighborhood too.
there are different parts of, or different funding mechanisms that are possible for that, including Safe Routes to Schools money, which is built in through developer fees, and also there's grants available through the state and the federal government. I don't know if Chris wants to add to that or not. That's
No, but we have future funding sources for that ongoing.
Mary, I think the transportation analysis was provided by Fair Peers. And she also covered, or they covered, bicycle access. So I felt like that whole approach was pretty light. If it were my neighborhood school, bike lanes and absolute adherence to giving allowing kids that option in a safe way would be really important to me. So I know in the document they had talked about the project could increase bicycling in the area, but I would like to see more emphasis on that the project should increase bicycling in the area. If we're building a neighborhood school, we want to make sure that our kids can bike safely and that all of that is provided. So not only sidewalks, but of course bicycles. I know the Fair Peers document talks about bicycle parking lot, but it was pretty light on bicycle lanes and how to protect kids.
And there's a whole nother process for anything outside the boundaries of the school. The city's been very gracious with inviting us to their Safe Routes meetings and participating in those when it comes to access between parks and schools and through the city of Morgan Hill. It's in the master plan. They've actually formed a committee to really analyze, not just there, but everywhere in Morgan Hill for that. The extension of pathways, great examples over at Paradise Valley where the plan is to extend that walkway, across and through south, that the city's been working on.
That's very positive information. I'm glad to hear, that.
Yeah, and Scott Kerr, the senior traffic engineer for the city, also mentioned that all of Pete has shoulder bike pathways going both ways. And part of the analysis in doing the roundabouts was to give that opportunity to cross over Pete if and when it ever does get to a two-lane each way. You have a touch tone to get to the other side of a wider street. So those, I believe they had talked. I don't have the document for them, but they had talked about those. And to Steve's point, yeah, our document really focuses on the actual on-site school site look, and then the city's been a partner of developing the safety bike lanes, linking all the bike pathways.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to address another question regarding safety. In my public comments, I certainly went to Sacramento to the independent review panel also. In fact, I was the one who initially made contact with them, and then Trustee Borgioli followed up and actually developed a relationship with the people on the board. It was very, very helpful, which allowed me to have a discussion with the toxicologist on the independent review panel. And she was, I was very happy to hear when I talked about pink tennicus, she validated that and said, well, toxicology is going through a crisis. It's going through a crisis of paradigms. And something like looking at a threshold level of 0.034 mg over kg for Gelden. God bless you. Could be 10 years from now, 50 years from now, may really be outmoded. And so if we're looking at the future, we really need to look at what we're asking people to do, what we're actually measuring. So I'd just like to make that point first, that the work that, again, that Trustee Borgioli has referred to about the fact that there will be some deodorant left in the ground. We're not remediating by offhaul all of the deodorant. We're leaving quite a bit under the soil. We know that earthworms as well transport it. There's 250,000 to 1 million earthworms. There's an article that was placed in the Mitigated Negative Declaration about the fact that one of many studies about earthworms in Gelden, that earthworms are able to accept and ingest 45-year-old Gelden, 45-year-old Gelden. They will burrow down to 6 feet. They come up, they go down, they move around. They're living things, and there's a lot of them. So I just wanted to make that point. But a larger point that I was very frankly disturbed about when I read the revised Mitigated Negative Declaration the other day was concerning the question of inundation and earthquakes. Now, I was really stunned because I am aware of the fact that in 2015, CEQA had a Supreme Court ruling in December that basically said that CEQA requires an analysis of the project's impacts on the environment, not the environment's impacts on the project. Requires. That's the operative word. CEQA does not require us to look at the environment's impact on the project, i.e., we have Anderson Dam. I went to the Anderson Dam, Santa Clara Valley Water District public meeting this spring, and I think the 100 or 200 people in the audience were kind of stunned and shocked by the fact that at that point, the dam was over 100% of capacity, and there was absolutely no way to get that water out except over a period of several months. And if we had an earthquake, the place where this particular school is located, within 5 minutes it would start to fill with water. 1 foot every 5 minutes. 1 foot every 5 minutes. After 10 minutes, there's 2 feet of water. After 3 feet, after 50 minutes, 3 feet, and so on. It go up to like 25, 30 feet. And we're gonna have a parking lot there. We're gonna have cars there. And so if you wanna talk about the impact of the project on the environment, which is what we can and should be looking at, if you can remember back to Hurricane Katrina, think about the floods and the cars going down the road and all kinds of things going. That's what we're facing. That's what we're facing in the event of an earthquake between now and 2020 or 2021. There is no plan, there's no EIR for the dam. It's going to be very, very complicated EIR. And I doubt that it'll even be in 2020. Maybe 2021, 2022 is already been postponed. And the reason why it was postponed is because an additional study was made that showed that the prior study of the dam did not account for the actual construction of the way the dam is, because now they have to take almost the entire dam down because it's all set to buckle and it's aged. It's basically a mud kind of dam. It's a very, very primitive kind of structure. We are at risk here in Morgan Hill. And so I was disturbed that the district chose, through their consultant, SSS, to go the quick and dirty route of going with what DPSC and SEQA would require as opposed to what we could do. Because footnote number 12 in the 2015 Supreme Court ruling says that that the court actually invites and encourages an applicant such as us to actually have a higher standard, to actually talk about the environmental impact of existing environmental hazards on the project itself, i.e. the dam. And I was very, very disturbed, because if you'll remember, if you read the original CEQA, mitigated declaration, they had really a true piece of folly. They said in the event of an earthquake, first of all, or dam failure, they said, they would expect that the city would probably call them and let them know that the dam was starting to dissipate. Yeah, that's really likely. And that the evacuation route would be to go to Jackson Academy. That's just amazing. That's really just amazing. If you look at the city plan for evacuation route for that neighborhood, it's not to go south, it's to go north, if you can. And so I'm very, very disgusted that once again, we're going for the quick and dirty route, just like we're using off-wall instead of something like bioremediation, which is a longer-term solution. We're doing the same to our kids with the inundation situation. So it was very, very disturbing to see that. By the way, if I were a parent at, let's say El Toro, or Barrett, or Live Oak, well, I live around El Toro, and I know that for me, if that dam split a couple months ago, within 20 minutes, my house would be inundated. I'm just a mile and a half down the road. So to build a school in that location without the dam retrofitted, which it won't be till about 2025, I think is not only short-sighted, I think it's immoral. I think it's immoral. It's immoral to do this. Because what we're doing is we're putting property over people. We're putting cash over kids. And this is not this is not free land. This is not free land. This is land that we must remediate. We trustees, back in September, we actually voted rather short-sightedly, I think, on a resolution that basically said, let's take escrow as soon as the environmental situations are basically resolved here. So we're now in a box. We're in a box right now. And it's something that we need to look at what we're doing here. We need to take a step back from the technicalities and look at the bigger picture of what could happen. There's a reason why there's a question about inundation on the CEQA document and why they didn't take it off after 2015. Because they are inviting us to take the higher standard, not to do what's required, but to do what's best. This is a school. This is not a shopping mall or a housing development. We don't have a burning need for more classrooms next year. We don't have that. And we all know there are other options here in Morgan Hill to build schools. And the neighborhood doesn't want it. And they're telling us that the 243 homes that the Borello family that Chris Borello, who's the project manager, is selling and developing, they're not gonna send the kids to the school. So this is gonna cause more traffic. It's gonna create potential fire hazards, earthquake hazards, evacuation hazards. It's gonna totally change the nature of the neighborhood for no reason. You know, I believe that my point of view will not win tonight, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I think, like Trustee Borgioli, it is very clear for us to take a moral stand tonight. Because certainly, if there is a disaster, or if anybody even gets sick, like they did in Encinitas a few years ago, where they had these dust controls. They had the wetting down of the soil. And 16 people in the neighborhood in Encinitas, around a parcel half the size of this, got sick. And their pets got sick. So, you know, we can close our eyes. We can take the quick and dirty route. We can do that. And we can just vote, go ahead, approve it, send the machines in there, and we will live to regret it. I warn you, you will live to regret it if you vote to go forward with this. Expediency is not what we should be thinking about. We should be thinking long-term, what is best for the children, what's best for this little community that these people have worked very, very hard to be able to move into and live into, and I think they should have that right as American citizens. So let's use our big mind here and not just get mired down with technical details. Although I have to appreciate what Trustee Borgioli did, because I bet if he had enough time with his background in measurement, he'd go through this document and pick out 5 or 6 other areas and do the same fine job. So thank you, Trustee Borgioli. I do appreciate it. And I think the community does as well.
Wanted to address something?
Yeah, I had a few of those.
Thank you.
I was trying to keep track of them since we were making points. So, with regards, I'll go back in backwards order. Speaking directly to the flood inundation dam, and you're correct. CEQA doesn't address our impact on the environment, not the environment's impact on us. That's FEMA. And so when we build projects, like most of Morgan Hill, we're in a flood zone. So all new buildings, like the hotels that are building downtown, all have to be built 3 feet above a certain grade, and it's all dictated. There's a book on it when civil engineers build buildings. So with regards specifically to the ideas of flood, and you know, in talking about with our planners, if anything, if we did build a school here, and when the school is built, it will probably likely be one of the islands in the middle of all the different residences, because all residences will be impacted if there was that second catastrophic failure. But yeah, to be correct, it isn't the CEQA, it's FEMA and our civil engineers when they design the floodplains. It's all through there. So and then with regards to earthquake measures, we report not to the city for building permits. We report to the Division of City Architect, who has all the seismic codes that any new building has to be built in California to those codes, and all schools are built to DSA standards for earthquake. Just want to be clear, the governing agencies, which that is not this document CEQA, that is actually the Division of City Architect, and the FEMA's portion of the design. And with regards to comment on the comments of both trustees regarding the awful method being quicker, it is quicker. It is also something when the staff analyzed it, myself and our consultants, it was safer. And I think when we looked at all the schools, I could not find one school in California that has done any kind of bioremediation on their campus. All the schools that had done in the studies that were issued in the last, I think it was 5 years, and I think I provided that document in the first time we had started talking about it, all mentioned that awful was done. And while I'm not a toxicologist, when I look at the history of those procedures by other school districts and with boards such as yourselves and staff such as myself, not one of them had done bioremediation. Maybe take a second look at the efficacy of bioremediation. And I won't pretend that I know everything about toxicology, but that was sort of a determining factor of awful. And just to be clear, you know, if we were to do nothing, you know, the property in one way or another will be developed at one point. The property to the north is already going through their awful method and is going to be going through that. So if it's a factor of what is safe for children and what is safe, I mean, the rigor that we are held to as a school district is much higher than that of the amount of hoops that we have to go through and all the regulations that we have is much different than a residential developer. So I just like to throw that out there when we talk about endangering kids and who are oversight. We have so many agencies that oversight everything we do.
Thank you.
If I can make a reply.
I think Mary would like.
Well, I mean, just for each time I'm speaking, if I may. I don't know who's gonna buy houses in his neighborhood after all the information we have here. I think if I were the developer, what I would do is I would use bioremediation and phytoremediation, and they do work. And there's actually geotechnical engineers who live in Morgan Hill. There's one who's doing it, who has done it, and NASA has just published a paper. So technology is changing, and a lot of the proven technologies that DTSC has were designed in 2008. It's 2017, folks. We're in Silicon Valley. So that's all I'll say. But I mean, I'm not a toxicologist, but like Trustee Borgioli, I'm looking for answers here. And I'm very disturbed when I see.
I'll just toss in, I went to the sales office and they're sold out. They're opening their next, the next phase in September, October. So they're selling. Mary, you were next.
Yeah, I just want to say that.
They're not informed.
I don't know.
I wasn't informed, and I have a house right next to the lot.
Okay.
And I'm selling my house because of this. I'm selling my house. No, it's important to hear us.
I do.
I know you.
I do think
I'm selling my house. I have 3 kids. After all this hearing, I cannot stay there. They're starting construction next month, moving the dirt. I'm out. I cannot stay there. After listening to this, I have 3 kids, 6-year-old, 4-year-old, a 50-month baby. I live right across the street. I understand I had 3 minutes to talk, but I'm so fed up with all this conversation.
So afterwards.
Would you live there? Would you be living in my house if you're
Afterwards,
me?
we could be talking more about it, but the board needs to finish the conversations.
I understand. Sorry about that, but.
We'll go through this.
We're all frustrated. We appreciate that. When I looked through the health, so there's a significant section on the health requirements for all the levels of all the aspects of the soil that we looked at, and they seem to me to be exceedingly stringent, exceedingly specific, and that just led me to I was remembering that I find it rather extraordinary that the folks who've been working on this took all these comments, all this data, and I very much appreciate the addition by Christine Hildebrand of a couple of additional articles that DTSC and the other folks that worked on it responded in 10 days. So if I recall, the comment period ended on August 7th. They must have begun compiling on August 8th. It's now August 18th. So in 10 days, these folks who've been doing this for decades came forward with comments and responses, some overly sufficient and overly adequate, some maybe not what we exactly wanted, but I think it was quite remarkable, not to mention the work of the staff in pulling this all together and getting it posted, so I want to thank you guys for that. I feel like we make a lot of decisions in the state of California. Many, many decisions are made every single day on where to build and how to build and how to keep people safe, not just school children, but those of us who are homeowners, home renters, etc. And so we all are weighing a lot of factors in our lives every single day. Every decision that we make, I as a parent, driving myself to and from work, where I choose to live, the house I chose to buy, and all of the dangers and risks that are inherent in my neighborhood as well. So I think that's why it's so frustrating, but we all are very experienced at that. Many of us in this room are parents, so we're very experienced at making these kinds of decisions about what we're going to do, what exposure we're going to take. So I appreciate the conversation, discussion, and the research. The last thing I'll say is that the discussion, thank you, Dr. Gerard, mentioning inundation. This might not be the place, but I did want to say that when the dam was 100% full, of course, the neighborhood of Los Paseos and Martin Murphy were also very concerned, and I would like to see on a future item that we need to look at. The dam is only at 55 or 60% right now, but because in the North Coyote Valley, the necking down of the valley, the water rushes through that area right into Martin Murphy and Los Paseos at a much deeper rate because there's less surface area for the water to pass through. So at some point in the future, I would like to make sure that we have plans, we have more time, a longer warning in the South San Jose area, but the water will be deeper at Murphy and Paseo, Los Paseos. So I'd like to make sure we address that in the future. Sorry if I took the wrong place to say that.
It's unbelievable nobody mentioned the gas line that goes across there. 36-inch gas line. That to me is not even the power lines. Forget the power lines. So you got to be 100 feet. Fine, you're 100 feet. What about the gas line? 36-inch gas line. Can you imagine if something happens there? An engineer from PG&E, a friend of mine, told me I would not live. I would even buy a house right on top of the line. Imagine a school. Can you imagine a school? But anyways.
Are there any other last
Yeah,
comments?
I want to, Mary, you mentioned the 78-inch pipeline. It's on page 318, and if you read the last paragraph, it also says that it warrants further evaluation by CDE. So it may not be at the 12-inch level, but it still says warrants, and this is one of the experts, it warrants further evaluation. So should we ignore that? On page 312, this is the 12-inch line, I believe, and talks about a large magnitude earthquake, but that also says that there's a trigger that could warrant further evaluation by CDE. So are we to ignore that?
Response,
Yeah, sure.
Well, you're probably gonna give me some excuse. All I'm saying is, the document is saying it should warrant further evaluation by California Department of Education.
Would you like an answer to the question, should we ignore that? Or-
Yeah, I think so.
No, so we have some information.
So yes, they are. That's the short of it. So plans get submitted to CDE for approval and get reapproved, then this MND will be sent to them for consideration. Because there are comments that were made even in our preliminary studies where CDE has been multiple times to give us even preliminary site approval before we even started any process with regards to going further with any kind of phase 1 environmental site assessment. So yes, all those lines will be, and actually, I believe, going back to your previous comment, Gino, the 14 days that the Santa Clara Valley Water District asked for was specifically with regards to their project they have going on, I believe. I know they commented and we responded to the comment specifically to our project, but they had their own MND going on, and I think that they have like a warehouse or something they're building on their easement, and so they wanted to see, I have to get the back, that was specific to ask them for that time. So when we responded, it was that, we were specifically working on the project.
So, first of all, I want to just give some of my thinking as I've wrestled with this issue. And I want to point out, this is not an easy issue. This is not something that I think any of us have taken lightly or been dismissive about. But before I make some comments, I want to say thank you also to the community members that emailed us, that reached out to us. In particular, I want to mention Ms. Claudia Cibrian. Sent me an email today where she laid out some very thoughtful analysis of her thoughts on the MND, on the raw. I take, as a trustee, I take effort to read through the documents we're given, but I'll say candidly, because these are not, because this isn't my full-time job, because I'm not retired or self-employed like some of my colleagues, I depend on community feedback in order to understand these issues. There's a lot of issues that we have to consider, not just this issue. And so I just want to say for that reason, I really appreciate community members like Claudia and others who sent us emails as well, who took the time to go deep on this issue and send us their thoughts. And I want to invite community members in the future. I welcome your thoughts, your feedback on these issues. One other thing I want to say too, relative to those comments, is that I appreciated the respectful and thoughtful tone of Claudia's comments. That it was very much laying out the arguments of these are the specific points that I have concerns about. This is the analysis I've done. I find that much more helpful for helping me weigh these decisions than, frankly, some of the other emails we've received. There are more of a belligerent or harassing, bullying tone that try and, I think, intimidate us into making decisions by And I just want to say I appreciate the community members who sent those thoughtful comments. Now, the general comment I want to make relative to this issue, as I've thought about it, is that this really comes down to risk. Comes down to the bigger picture is risk. How do we handle risk? How do we mediate risk? And risks are scary. The Eldrin and the potential implications it could have are scary. A gas line is scary. A dam flooding, those are scary things. Risks are scary. But I also want to point out that life is inherently risky. When you get in a car and drive on the freeway, you're taking a risk that some crazy person could crash into you. You're taking a risk that you're breathing in air that has fumes in it from the other cars. When you go out in the sun, you're exposed to UV rays. It's risky. When you go in public amongst people who could be carrying contagious diseases, you're taking risk. When you vaccinate your kids, you're taking risk. I had a friend in high school who was bedridden for 2 years because of a bad reaction to a vaccine. When you don't vaccinate your kids, you're taking risks that they could get exposed to diseases that otherwise are totally preventable due to the benefits of modern medicine. And I just want to point out that we can't eliminate all risks. It's unreasonable to think that we can eliminate all types of risks from these projects. And our job is not to try and eliminate risks. I think it's really to try and mediate the risks and decide what is the appropriate level of risk that we feel comfortable with as a community taking as we move forward with this project. And making sure that those risks are extremely conservative, extremely reasonable before we move forward. When I look at the RAW, I think some people mischaracterize that as a document about building on a toxic site. The RAW is not about building on a toxic site. It's about a plan to remediate the risks that toxins would otherwise pose to our students. Now that being said, over the last few months, we've had the DTSC meeting. I've received emails from others. There's been a lot of community discussion. I think there are some legitimate concerns, some issues with some of the plans that I think are worth noting. In particular, the one that stands out in my mind is trying to understand how did the Eldrin come back after the remediation back in 2005. To me, that's still a mystery, and it's a mystery. I don't know. We may never know. I was incredulous when at the DTSC meeting they mentioned that the land had been resprayed. That doesn't seem logical to me that would have happened. I'm not totally convinced by other hypotheses that are floating out there about how it could have come back. And I think in terms of the safety issues with the alcohol method, I think there's people that have raised questions about potential risks involved in the alcohol, and I think some of those are worth noting. But I will say, after wrestling with this issue, thinking about it, reviewing the RAW, reviewing the MND, they're not perfect documents, but as I read them, they're documents that I feel comfortable with. I can say, honestly, I would feel comfortable if we went forward with these plans, sending my kids to a school that's built on that site. But I also realize other people in our community have different levels of toleration and accept for risk. Just because I feel comfortable sending my children there doesn't mean that everyone has to agree with me. I'm not someone who eats organic foods. I'm not someone who, avoids downhill skiing. I take risks in my life, and the risks that I take may not be risks that other people are willing to take. A big thing that's influenced my thinking on this, Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel laureate. He's a professor of psychology, but earned the Nobel Prize in economics for studying cognitive bias, for uncovering the ways in which people's cognitive biases influence their decision making, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And he has a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And in that book, they talk about almost this exact issue of the public scare of toxins in the environment. And one of the points he makes out, which I think I see happening here, is that these risks, because they scare us, because they affect us emotionally, we have elevated attention that we pay to these risks. And then we can get caught in these, what he calls, cascades, where between people in the community advocating for an issue and getting increased attention on social media or in the newspaper, like that risk and that fear of the risk can build to a level that really exceeds the actual risk that we're handling. And in some ways, I wonder if we see that here. And so, but in the end of this chapter, where he talks about these types of risks, he points out it's frustrating at times to see public officials who are experts on an issue who have worked to make sure that their decisions are informed and not driven by cognitive bias, that those decisions can get derailed by the fears of the public. But he also makes this comment. He says that he believes that widespread fears, even if they are unreasonable, should not be ignored by policymakers. Rational or not, fear is painful and debilitating, and policymakers must endeavor to protect the public from fear, not only from real danger. As I've considered this, I think it's our duty, given the fact that different people have different levels of toleration for risk, the risks involved in this project. I think we have a duty to our community not just to accept the risks that are comfortable for Tom Arnett, or the risks that are comfortable for anyone else on this board. We need to make sure that we're considering how other people in the community feel about the risks that we're taking. And hopefully get to a point where everyone can feel comfortable with the level of risk that we decide to take. The other thing I consider in all of this is the trust that we have with the public. I think we as a board need to also consider that our success as a district depends not just on whether we have facilities to house our students in, and whether we have those facilities in particular neighborhoods. It really depends on trust. Our ability to attract families to enroll their kids in our schools depends on earning their trust. Our ability to invite people to be engaged and involved members of their school communities depends on how well we maintain their trust. And a real particular issue I think current for us is our ability to pass something like a partial tax. Depends on the trust level that we have with the community. I would say that even if a majority of us feel comfortable with these plans, I think if we move forward right now, while some members of our community are vocal about feeling extremely anxious about these plans, I worry that we do damage to our greater purpose, which is serving the community, and that we do damage by hurting the trust that we have with that community. My hope is that we can move forward and make progress, not get stuck in deadlock. As a board, a majority of us could vote tonight to keep moving forward with these plans. But as I reflect on this, I personally think it would be wise, in order to maintain that trust with our community, to do some additional work with on the plans that we have. We've held our required community meetings, we've solicited public comments, we've prepared responses to those comments, but I think for this project to really be successful, I think we need to take some additional time to sit down with some of the people who are most concerned about this, people like Claudia, who, like I said, her email to me seemed it felt intellectually honest. Some of the emails I've received, not so much. I think there's some people who have committed to fighting this issue, and because of that strategy, they're not really looking for the truth or for what's reasonable. They're looking for, how can I look for every single reason I can to cast doubt on this? And I think if that's the place we're operating from, I don't know how we make progress. But I am hopeful that we can work together as a community, not just to do what we need to in order to be compliant with state policy. And I personally give a lot of credit to the state policies that are set by experts who are deeply committed to these issues. But I think beyond just making sure that we're dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's to do what the state requires of us, I think there's some additional effort we can do to make sure that the people who are legitimately scared or legitimately concerned, who are also intellectually honest and willing to find solutions, that we work with them to help make sure that this is something that we can move forward on as a community together, and that won't undermine the trust that we as a board or we as a district have with our community.
Thank you.
Well, I do, because I do too. Thank you, Tom. I'm a psychologist, and I value emotion as well as cognition. In fact, I think that's what emotional intelligence is all about. And I frankly think that by and large, the people in the community that I've been talking to, I don't see any evidence of cognitive bias. I don't see that. I don't think you're deluded by that. I think in the main, many of you are engineers, you're scientists, you're professionals. I respect you. I certainly want to second what Tom said regarding Claudia. Outstanding. In fact, you've been an inspiration to me during dark times when I thought there was absolutely no hope to delay the school or take another look at it, as Tom is suggesting. So I just want to commend the community, and I certainly want to have a very strong relationship with the community, but it has to be based on an equal footing. And I think what has exemplified this project, unfortunately, has been, for example, tonight. This is absolutely ridiculous. We would schedule a meeting of such import on a Friday night when just a few blocks away there was a wonderful concert that many of our community are going to. It's also a Friday night where it's a family time. And this is not the first time this has happened. The other meeting we had in July and in June was on a 3 p.m. on June 27th. And those of you who work, you couldn't attend. So I totally support what Tom is saying here. We do need to take another look at this. I would like to find some kind of a consensus. And therefore we cannot rush forward. We must take a step back. We must do that. And we must push the aggressive building plans aside, allow time for the community to look and to get even more involved. We have a small core of people who've been very active, and I think that some of them have overstepped their bounds in terms of maybe not being as polite. I think they're frustrated, but they're good people. These are good people. These are not nut jobs. These are people who care. And I would rather I come from a small town in Connecticut where you should see the kind of fights that we have at our town meetings. That's how I grew up. That's what democracy is. So I think that, I certainly read that book you're talking about, and I think that emotion is not a bad thing. We're not all totally cerebral. And emotion gives us the motivation and the will to act. So let us come together as a board and let us find an alternative to the present plan of moving and rushing forward on a Friday night. So thank you, Tom.
Any other last brief comment?
Well, I want to make clear, I'd like to see us move forward on this, but in terms of the process of how that happens, I'm not sure what that would look like. So here's to from staff.
Yeah, so I think we can address that, because after we put the plans in place, hopefully the board will approve going forward with it, then we will include community groups in on that, from the neighborhood, from those that would be in the attendance boundaries. I think we sent out notices to, I want to say 400 homes?
Yeah. Yeah, our standard procedure is to, even when we do normal development on existing school sites, to continually apprise the community of what's going on and again, build that trust. I mean, your point of building trust, I mean, I grew up here in Morganville, I've been here forever. And part of the stakeholdership of just and being a father, you have to do that. It's not an option. So yeah, I think we continually do that back and forth. In fact, we've met with the Borellos. I went to school with the Borellos who donated part of the land whose namesake is in the school. And they're very interested in meetings with them about the history of the property and how they always wanted to support children and in their residence or their business with the orchards and the fruit trees. And they said this is always something they had thought about. And so I think that we've also involved them so that it's not something that's come up in the topic, but it's a comment to you about trust and building. But that is part of that process. And again, as we steward the process forward, I mean, you talked a little about trust, and I just like to comment on that. As a school district, and as myself as staff, I mean, I would trust myself more than a developer. Nothing against developers or anything like that, but we have resources and tools at our disposal to do things that other folks can't. Even with the comments and being critical of data and science, I mean, we actually have the resources to do if those things are available. I don't know if anybody else could to the degree that we can.
What kind of, in particular, what kind of resources are you referring to?
Well, we have a large field of consultants. We have many different consultants that have expertise, and we also have the resources, the financial resources to do a premium method of off-fall, which is more expensive than some other methods. Those alone, plus along with the huge resources of the district of reach out to parents and our human resources that are available. So,
our remediation of the soil is actually something that I think the developer in that area for Green Homes is going to do as well, because it's more extensive than they might be required to do. So I think that that's also having a positive effect on the way they're remediating the soil for the 9 homes that are to the north of the property. So that work with the developer and in the interest of the people that live in that neighborhood is already happening. And that's based on our work.
So to return real quick, in terms of what I think we should do or need to do to build that trust, I appreciate that we have processes in place like having community meetings to try to facilitate that. But I do worry that just executing the process of having a meeting may not be enough. I think it's probably going to involve leadership from the district, reaching out to particular individuals and sitting down and having coffee and saying, let's really talk about
There were
this.
a couple of people, or at least one lady who laughed that I spent time with afterwards, and I think that was great for both of us, because I got to hear her deep concerns, also to explain some things that were not necessarily true, that she had heard from somewhere, that, kind of explain processes and things like that. So I think you're exactly right, the face-to-face meetings, and I will certainly commit to that.
I know during this process, many of us have met, with neighbors who wanted to meet and talk. And, I think we're all very sincere in our diligence and listening. And I appreciate your comments. I think there's always more work, and inclusion is certainly the goal. Are we ready to make a motion? Ron?
Yes, I'm still a little bit concerned about the city alternatives involving the city's plans and things else. So this is a motion I'm going to come up with. I move that we adopt a resolution to approve the findings and adoption of the mitigated negative declaration with the city suggested alternative comments and responses in mitigation monitoring program and approval of the Borello Elementary School project.
Do we have a second?
Could you read that again, Ron?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused by
Sure.
what he's trying to say.
Okay, so there's two alternatives. We had the recommendation from staff, the city, after discussions and actually several sit-down meetings with groups, is the city came up with an alternative that we also met with the neighborhood to discuss, and he's making the recommendation on that alternative.
Yeah, I have, I wasn't aware of that until I came to the meeting tonight. So I guess what I'm doing is I'm making the motion to approve this also with city suggested alternatives. In other words, what they have stated to us tonight, because I don't believe that was originally part of the project.
Correct, those were in response to the comments. So when we drafted the MND and circulated it for the 30 days, the city commented with their staff regarding the improvements to Mission Avenue. Specifically, the alternative, the difference between the base mitigated negative declaration and what specifically the city commented on was the usage of a kindergarten drop-off area on Mission Avenue. We had only shown it as staff lot, so in the alternative, we would be shifting staff to Pete Road and providing capacity for kindergarten children parking on Mission Avenue.
Right. So, do we have so I'll second Ron's motion.
I'm kind of a little bit concerned about this motion because are we approving before we are approving, we're approving this?
No, it's the same
This
motion.
is part of the motion.
Yeah, it's part of the motion.
Yeah, it's all.
Good question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Can we have a roll call please on those nays?
Yeah.
I think we have
Gino?
Teresa and
Thank you.
David. All right, with no other business, adjourn.
I do have one.
Oh, I'm sorry, what did I do?
You have to say the name.
Do we say?
Sorry.
Say-
Oh, yeah.
That was just wishful thinking. I'll be too, I'm sorry. Okay, this, do I have a motion to ratify the award of the Borello School Site Remediation Project?
Can I actually ask some questions on this one?
Okay,
Given my concern is that.
can I stop you there? We have to extend the time.
I'll make a motion to extend to, I'll say 8:30, hopefully we don't go that long.
Yeah, look at Mary's face.
Don't do it, Mary. Should we say 8:15?
Would you modify it?
You can always go less.
All right,
I'll make a motion to extend 8:15.
Okay, somebody second. Okay, thank you. Mary?
Second.
Mary? I thought, okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
I think,
Gino didn't vote, David didn't vote.
so we've got, no, I thought David.
For.
All those in favor of extending the meeting?
Aye.
I think we've got 7-0. Yeah. Okay, so now the meeting is extended, and we're back to your question.
So, the RAW that we approved, I'm concerned about moving forward with that, given the anxieties that those people have, and I'm concerned about then approving the contract that's on here and moving forward quickly with that, given that I think those things are still unresolved. So I'm curious, what are the options that we have other than just moving straight forward with this?
Go for it.
I would just clarify real quick, so the board didn't approve the raw, we just.
Oh, that's right, we approved the.
So technically, the DTSC has jurisdiction over the hygienic work and all that, just to be.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah,
You're refreshing my memory.
Yeah, no worries.
Then the board delegated authority for this contract. What I've heard is differences between what I understand the removal process will be and what was presented in social media and out there. It was clear that I believe that some people believe that we're gonna pile up everything in the middle and we were gonna have these points of air assessments in the north and the south downwind, and that isn't sufficient based on some information that was presented to them. However, that's not necessarily how I understand the process is gonna work. So I think as part of that, it should be a meeting with anybody in the neighborhood that wants to hear exactly how the process is gonna happen. And I mean, you could read about it, but it doesn't really outline it, and it doesn't provide question and answer opportunity for the neighbors. There were statements that were made that there's always wind here and there's always going to be dust, and so I think that they're going to need to feel comfortable and actually meet with our consultants. So is that fair to say that we could bring our consultants in to meet with anybody?
Yes, to be clear, the raw isn't approved yet, so it won't probably be finalized till about mid-September because they're going through their process.
UTSC has to approve it.
They have
Does it
to
still come back to us?
It doesn't come back to us, but we cannot use it until DTSC approves it. So the final work product will be available and at that time. So we have time between now and then if there is additional community feedback or things that the board still wanted to solicit. There's plenty of time for that. And the DTSC would be, I'm sure, would be open. They felt different meetings.
I guess my big concern in this is, I think for people to feel like they're being heard and that their concerns are being heard is, I have a concern that these kind of meetings, as much as they're well-intentioned, can very much just be, let's correct your misconceptions so that we can keep going forward. I think people need to have a sense that the district isn't going to move forward until they've listened and potentially modified plans, rather than just telling people, we're here to tell you why you're misconceived.
No, hearing about those concerns and correcting them or addressing them, right? If there's different information that we need to give to them that they don't have, giving that information, but also addressing them if there's concerns and they're saying, well, if you ask a question, what about pulling the truck out of this area? Are you going to address, I don't know, traffic cleaning or whatever it might be? I think those are legitimate, all of them are legitimate concerns that should be addressed and talked about. So.
And that we still have room to make adjustments, or if the raw is set, can we deviate from that?
You can't go less than the required, but you certainly can go more.
Sure. For example, if you want additional signage or those sort of things, which are, I'm not sure what you're thinking about.
Yeah, well, I'm not the one that's as deep. I mean, I care about this issue, but I have to be candid. There's people that care very deeply about this, more than I do. I'm not saying I don't care, but I just know there's people that feel very strong about this, and I want to
Well, and to your earlier conversation, I am a person that eats organic food. And I am concerned about vaccinations, and so there's aspects about what we do that are really personal to me. When I walk into a classroom, the first lens I look at that classroom through is, would I have my child in this classroom? And so this question was a legitimate question. Would you buy this house? And I want to know, if we're looking at that school site, that I want my children there, and I would feel very comfortable moving in that neighborhood to do that. And my children went through public schools, all the way through, and are doing very well, thank you.
And through sending my children to school here in Morgan Hill, the same thing, Bob, and concerns about the soil. So I think we all appreciate, the community's questions. Should we entertain a motion at this point? Okay.
I move to ratify award of the Borello School Site Remediation Project.
Thank you, Mary. Second?
Okay.
Ron seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
Got that, Jamie? Same-
Yes, I do.
same
Same
thing.
vote.
Yeah, I got it, thank you.
Now am I adjourned?
Mhm.
Okay. The Board of Education meeting is adjourned. Thank you.